Well, joining us with more insight on the latest increase in tensions between Beijing and Washington is Jaques Delisle, professor of law and political science and director of the Center for Study of Contemporary China at the University of Pennsylvania. Thanks very much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
A lot to talk about. I want to begin by chatting about the Trump administration's stance and actions on Hong Kong. Tell me what you think the U.S. is hoping for out of all of this, and how do you think Beijing is going to react moving forward with the U.S. Actions?
Well, I think with the Hong Kong issue, there are genuine, long-standing U.S. concerns there about Hong Kong's autonomy, democracy, human rights, and it's partly a matter of sort of the values issues that play some role, although never a dominant role in U.S. policy on the one hand, and a sense of the promises made in the joint declaration. So those are deep-seated issues, but the temperature has gone up a lot on those issues in part because of the broader issues, the broader problems in U.S.-China relations.
Yeah, and let's talk about the timing of all this. A lot of analysts and political observers who note that Donald Trump is trailing in presidential polls, at least most of them, and these experts believe Trump is trying to play to his base and show that he's still pushing America first and ready to play hardball with China or China bashing.
Yeah, and so I think something like the reaction to the national security law and its implementation in Hong Kong isn't so much tied to that, but a lot of the other things that are going on, the TikTok and WeChat executive orders and so on, I mean, those do seem very much timed to deal with political issues. It's part of a kind of scattershot, blame China and bash China. Ostensibly, it's about national security concerns, but if so, why China and not Russia? There are plenty of other ways to get access to the kind of information that the administration is ostensibly worried about with TikTok and WeChat. You know, there are mixed in, again, some more conventional values concerns, like reports of censoring information about Hong Kong on TikTok. But I think really it is a general poke a stick at China, and doing it so in a way, I would add, that's going to upset a lot of American young people who use TikTok and a lot of somewhat older American people like me who navigate around China only because we use WeChat.
Exactly. I mean, you can't do anything in China without WeChat. But is it going to hurt that much here in the United States if indeed it comes down on WeChat?
WeChat doesn't have that big a presence in the U.S., but for people who are linked to China, obviously it does. It's got some penetration. TikTok's a much bigger deal in terms of U.S. market presence, particularly with young people. And so I think that's one of the reasons it was picked out as a target. Some would suggest it may also be because TikTok was the medium for the excessive ticket requests for the ill-fated Tulsa rally that Trump saw badly underattended.
And there's been some pretty good parodies on there, well, of the president. But these are the two largest. These are the two largest economies on earth, and China has retaliated and appears ready to match the U.S. step for step in this tit-for-tat. What are some of the obvious problems with this escalating during a pandemic, during a sharp global economic downturn?
Yeah, I mean, I think the pattern has, as you say, been tit for tat and the escalation that goes with that. So it's another chapter in what's becoming a pretty thick book of steps toward delinking the economies to some extent. People talk about decoupling. I think there are people in the Trump administration who would like to see decoupling, but that's hugely costly and hugely disruptive. But we've seen it start to have an economic impact, and it's become tangled with some pretty ugly geopolitics, as you've seen the U.S. lobbying friends and allies not to use Huawei for 5G, and you've seen China sort of press the idea, which reciprocated by the U.S., so we might see kind of a fragmentation or a bifurcation of the world, particularly on the tech side, into two different camps.
Yeah, let's talk about those two different camps. Do you think that U.S. allies are heeding the concerns of U.S. President Donald Trump? Are they going on and having major issues with what China is doing, everything from the Philippines, concerned about the South China Sea, to other areas?
I think one of the puzzles and from the perspective of American interests, frustrations of the Trump administration has been that it's essentially gone to war without its friends. So we could go through a very complicated list of issues in U.S.-China relations, some of which I would consider to be legitimate concerns, some of which I think are grossly inflated, but it's been such a scattershot approach, and instead of seeking common ground with allies who would have some of the same concerns about Chinese industrial policy and export practices and market openness, instead of that, Trump's had engaged in trade wars with them as well, and countries have been kind of put untenably in the middle, and nobody much likes it. And in very recent weeks, we've started to see, as the expectation that Trump will more likely than not lose the election, I think he's become less relevant. I think people at this point are just trying to wait it out.
You know, we don't have a lot of time, but I want to get on this. China has had a dramatically growing middle class. U.S. businesses clearly want into that market to tap into that lucrative area. But is it safe for U.S. businesses right now, given the state of relations between the two nations? What should they be concerned about?
Well, I think they have a lot to be concerned about. As you see this escalation of political friction, they have to worry about retaliation from China. I mean, as the U.S. has tried to shut down Chinese companies, it's not at all inconceivable that part of the tit for tat would be to restrict U.S. companies' operations in China. U.S. companies also have to worry about U.S.-side restrictions. There's already concern about what kind of interaction with WeChat in China might run afoul of what is still a very vague executive order and whatever restrictions may follow from that.
Okay. Jacques Delisle, thank you very much. I greatly appreciate your insight.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.